Well, as always, it's wonderful to be here with you all. So why don't we just take a moment and just go inward? So you can close your eyes and just give yourself permission to arrive here fully. Just to arrive here. Life is such a busy performance for most of us. Sometimes we have taken on the character of our conditioning. We're just living out an old story or the old lines that habitually run through our head. And so I invite you this moment just to put all that down. And just to notice what's here that's fresh, that's alive. What's here that's beyond the story of, whoever you call yourself to be. What's here that's eternal, timeless, and so often in life when we go inward, the first thing we notice is some old pain, some old confusion, maybe some grumpiness, or agitation, irritability. Being human's hard. It's hard. And so it's okay just to admit that there's feelings in me that may be less than divine. There's, that old story just running in the background. And just for the next little bit, will you join me, giving yourself permission? Just to let it fall away. Just to let it all fall away. Notice what is here that's beyond the character, beyond the sense of confusion or agitation, sleepiness, or whatever it is. What's here? What's here? That's alive. What's here that's gentle? What's here that's innocent, despite your human character and all the silliness you've been involved in this lifetime? What's here that's beyond that? So just taking some deep, full breaths. And oftentimes it's helpful just to relax the body. So you can relax the muscles of the face, the jaw especially. We hold so much psychosomatic tension in the jaw, the throat, the belly, shoulders, the pelvis. And so we're just inviting awareness to wake up. Beyond the character. So if you just take a backward step and bring awareness, allow awareness to wake up in the back of the skull. Oftentimes we can connect with a deep and profound silence. There's a sense of relief, like, oh geez, I've taken myself too seriously this day. And so we're just breathing in and breathing out. And just traveling down into the heart and feeling the goodness of your heart. And again, even if there's heaviness or tension in the heart, feel deep into the center of your heart, like 3 inches inward. All that emotional pain sits on the surface, but if you go deeper, you'll find something innocent and pure. Just gently smiling. And allowing that gentle love from your heart just to spread out throughout your being. Again, relaxing the shoulders, feeling this radiance waking up. The shoulders, the neck, the spine. The belly deeply relaxing. Letting go of any unconscious tension there. And just feeling, just noticing what it's like. What it's like to be you when you don't have a big story, a character to defend. You don't have a personality to be. Just breathing in and breathing out. And so I'm going to transition to the talk now. And so you're welcome to open your eyes if you want, or you can just keep them closed if that's what feels good. Again, just breathing, feeling, and experiencing the depth of your being. You know, for the entirety of our life, we have this ongoing choice. Ongoing choice. Do I want to live from the depth, from the innocence of my own heart? Just this quiet goodness which has survived everything. Which has survived divorce and survived debt and fires and sickness and old age, young age. Sometimes the younger years are brutally difficult. Sometimes the older years are much easier. And we're just breathing and feeling and just staying with what we are. What we are. And so, I have a couple questions here, but if there's anyone here that has a question, you're welcome to bring it forward. Kind of clicking around on my Zoom screen here, and for some reason it doesn't let me see the comments, or I can't see the comments right now. And so if you do have a question, at some point you can just unmute yourself and say, hey, Craig, I have a question. Not exactly sure how to fix that this moment, but I'm going to answer the first question that I have on email here. So let me see if I can pull this one up here. It says, Craig, can you speak about grief, the importance of grieving on the spiritual path? This is a question from Alex, who's in Sweden. So thank you, Alex. Yeah, I was having a funny experience yesterday. My dryer at my house work, and I'm kind of one of those guys who just knows how to fix everything, and that's a blessing and a curse, because when you know how to fix everything, you tend not to want to pay anyone to fix something for you. And so, a plumber, to have a plumber come out to your house, it might cost $100 an hour for them to fix something. And so I looked at the job. It was just, fixing something with our dryer. And said, that should take me 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes. I can do that, crawl behind the dryer. And, I kid you not, 6.5 hours later, I was just really struggling with this project, and finally putting the finishing bolts back in and getting it all wrapped up. And oftentimes life is like this. Our mind will paint a picture of how something should go in theory. And when I used to build for my teacher, I built a couple different retreat houses and just all kinds of buildings and barns on the property. And there'd be time when we'd go meet with an architect or an engineer, and they'd draw it all up, and it would just look beautiful in theory. I said, yeah, you just follow these steps, these directions, you just follow the plans, everything falls into place. But that's not how it works in reality. My question that I have to any engineer or architect is, have you ever built something actually? Because when you build something, it's a lot different than just, drawing it up on a computer screen. There is 1,000,001 other factors to consider. And so my mind made the mistake, just like any architect makes, when they just draw it up real quick on their computer and they hand the plans to the builder, saying, oh yeah, it's easy peasy, just follow the plans and it'll turn out great. And so yesterday I tried to follow the plans and that I had in my mind, and like I said, a 15-minute job turned into 6.5 hours, 2 trips to Home Depot, all kinds of stuff breaking and needing more things to replace. And it was just one of those experiences. And I have this body that that's kind of been beaten up by life. It's just been beaten up, through extreme sports, through working too hard, for my teacher. I mean, the first, I think, 5 or 10 years for my teacher, most of what I did was not very glorious. It was working a shovel and a hammer and just, carrying heavy stuff back and forth and moving boulders and cutting trenches in the woods, to build trails. And so whatever it was just hard work. And so I really beat up my body. I really abused it when I was young. And so now that I'm getting older and I just crawl behind a dryer and you're all hunched over and, in a tight little spot and struggling, on my second trip, my first trip to Home Depot. No, this was actually the second trip to Home Depot. I was driving down the hill and I was taking some deep breaths, feeling into my body, and these tears just overcame me. these tears. And I just let them flow. And I noticed this just feels like I'm releasing energy. I'm releasing pressure. Like pressure is starting to build. When you are in a stressful situation, you're trying to fix something and stuff's breaking and it's getting really expensive. And, your wife's saying, hey, like, I thought we were going to, go play in the snow and have fun. And you're busy, spending the whole day, trying to fix something. And it's just like you can't keep everyone happy on planet Earth. Sometimes things break. Sometimes things are unpredictable. This is life. And oftentimes the body, when it's in, a crammed little area, just starts to build up pressure inside, stress. One of the great ways we let go of stress is through grieving. Many people have had this experience on a yoga mat where all they do is come into the yoga studio, roll out their mat, lay down, and they just start crying. And it feels good to cry. It feels good to let go. It feels good to release. In our culture in the West, many of us have been trained to believe that you're not a man if you cry, or you need to keep all your feelings in, or don't draw any attention to yourself, or what are you crying about? They're starving people in India and that kind of thing. And as mammals, one of the ways we release energy, pressure in our body is through grieving. So if we just look at the spiritual path purely from an energetic perspective, the spiritual path is about you opening to greater energies of divinity, greater energies of presence, greater energies of peace. So you're stepping out of your human animal energies, which tend to be, connected to a fight or flight response, the kind of dog eat dog mentality. I need to get ahead of everyone else, or I'm just trying to survive. And when you are just trying to survive, the energy of that, it feels, you feel like an animal. It feels like hell. The Buddha, when he described the mind as always having some level of agitation, some level of irritability to it. And so his focus was always on the peace that's beyond mind, the peace in which the mind arises, the peace in which the body arises, the peace in which, the identity of, your character arises. If we can focus on the context, our energy spreads out, it expands, we become bigger. Direct experience, what we are becomes bigger. And the normal human self that's feeling agitated, it can unravel and unwind. And so the whole spa industry is based on this premise. Just come in and lay down on a massage table, and right away you will start to melt. They do all kinds of essential oils and, fountains and candles and all kinds of silly things to set the mood. But the big thing they're doing is they just get you to lay down and you melt. Whatever stress is within your consciousness, it starts to unwind. It starts to unwind. So grieving is simply allowing pressure within you to unwind. And I don't care what the grief is about. If you have something within you that's tense, that's tight, it needs to unwind. So whether it's an old story, if it's an old story and you allow it to unwind, what happens is the story becomes less believable. Your life becomes less believable. Your struggle becomes less believable. It's like, okay, that happened. That was hard. Like when I think about yesterday, me being stuck behind this dryer and, crammed in there and reaching for tools and not being able to see and cutting my fingers. And, I was like, oh, it was so difficult in the moment. It was so painful because it's this tight little work area. It's like jammed in there, and there's just no room to work. My back was hurting. It was just, it was the opposite of, say, like proper yoga posture. It was like hunched over in all the wrong positions. Pressure builds. But now that it's today, it's like, oh geez, it's like no big deal. Okay, that was yesterday. It's come and it's gone. So what has gone? The pressure released. The pressure released when I got in the truck the second time, and I just started grieving, just being like, geez, this dryer is kicking my butt, and I can smile at it. I can laugh. I can let the muscles in my body relax. I can regroup. And so the tears were just flowing. And what the tears were just all my muscles just coming back into harmony, relaxing. The mind not worrying about how long it's taking. So grief is simply about releasing pressure. That's all it is. The more you grieve your past, the more psychologically healthy you will be, and the more space there will be in your consciousness. So it's very difficult for you to realize the spaciousness of your being if you are full of heaviness. When you're full of heaviness, the only thing you're experiencing oftentimes is heaviness. A fight with the heaviness. How do I get rid of this heaviness? How do I repress it more? Through drinking or smoking or eating or chasing or attaching or avoiding or whatever it is that our drug of choice is, whatever it is. And so when we give ourselves permission to grieve, basically we are pressing the pressure relief valve. And as mammals, it's important to shake, to tremble, and just let it empty out. And so grieving can be something as simple as, you're driving down the road and you notice your body is tense. And you take a deep breath. And you say, like, I don't want to be tense. So you take a couple more deep breaths and you just feel this gentle fluttering of your egoic nature. And let me explain that for a moment, because sometimes this is confusing to people. Our ego tends to hold on, almost like with claws. That's the feeling that makes us all feel imprisoned in life. And so the more stressed you become, the more the ego kind of grips into you. And again, this isn't the worst thing in the world. I'm not the teacher that says the ego is bad. It has a function. But if you're driving down the road and there's something in you that's just gripping and you're fighting with the past, if you wake up and just say, oh, what am I doing? I'm fighting with the past. What am I really doing in reality? I'm driving down the road. Can I come into the present moment? Right here, right now. Can I loosen the grip? And as you loosen the grip, what you will notice is there'll just be this little fluttering just throughout your nervous system. That fluttering is your ego just letting go of control. Letting go. Letting go. That's the process of grief. Just a little fluttering. Now, for some of us, if we're facing something really difficult, that flutter may turn into tears, shaking, mucus pouring down the nose. And come on, we're all human. We've all been there before. But this is such a wonderful spiritual practice. Is to let your body do what it needs to do. Let it melt. I've met many, many seasoned meditators who are carrying around intense grief, intense pain in their body, they're holding on to this, intense seriousness. And you look at them, and they just look like they want to rip your head off. We've all sat with people like this. You go on a spiritual retreat, and, you just see, there's normally a couple guys, couple gals, who are just looking like, boy, to quote one of my old friends, like someone just, I'll just be blunt here. Someone pooped in their Cheerios, in the morning. Like someone just, they had a tough run at it. And they're going about their spiritual practice of, trying to spiritually bypass their angst, their sadness, their heartache. And so they're just sitting, like concentrating real hard, just trying to get into some little teeny place of peace in their consciousness where they don't feel pain. And I made that mistake, for many years in the beginning. But once I realized the beauty of grief, the beauty of forgiveness, the beauty of letting go, it really changed how I practice. So one of the first things I do when I sit down in the body, when I sit down to meditate, is I just gently scan the body and notice, where am I holding myself tense? And a little game, that's fun to play is if you just squeeze every muscle in your body and you let go, and you do that, 2 or 3 times, what you'll notice is oftentimes there'll be just this flutter of the ego where it's like, oh, I can let go of my grip. It's like where the ego sees itself gripping so tightly, so tensely, and it says, gosh, that's a lot of work. I'm just going to let go. I'm just going to let go. And so grieving that's all it is. It's just, giving yourself permission to let go, And so, Alex, it's a beautiful question you asked, and thank you for this, because, this is one of the great doorways into the groundless ground. One of the great doorways. For many of us, we think we're going to experience the groundless ground, through saying a mantra, through, doing 12,000 prostrations or, whatever it is. But to truly experience the groundless ground, we have to walk through this doorway of absolutely letting go. Absolutely letting go. We have to let go of control. Deeply, completely. We have to walk through the doorway where we are holding on. And many people, they get confused by this teaching. They think, oh, I need to let go of all my material goods, or I need to let go of my job, or I need to let go of my partner. Normally, life isn't asking you to let go of those things. What life wants to know is, can you let go of your attachment to yourself? To yourself. Can you let go of your attachment to yourself? It's a great question. Can you let go of your attachment to your self-importance? Can you let go of your attachment to being, the need to being seen or heard by others? Because the funny thing that happens on the path is when you hear yourself, when you see yourself fully, you don't need others to see you. You don't need others to hear you. If you don't see yourself fully, if you don't hear yourself fully, then we neurotically need everyone else to see us, to hear us. We ask a lot, everyone around us to do our work. And so if we are going to step into the space of the groundless ground, if we're going to step into it, we have to walk through this doorway of facing ourselves, facing our fears, facing our confusion, facing our unworthiness. And you begin to discover, oh, there's something wonderful here, something profound here, something indestructible that's here. And it stops everything. And when everything stops, oftentimes we have this funny experience. We have this experience as if we are free falling through space. If you look at what the experience of grief is, for many people, they're just terrified of grieving. But when you let go into grieving, oftentimes it will feel like you are completely and totally out of control. Completely and totally out of control. And I always like to look at, all these experiences, say through the lens of enlightenment, through the lens of being awake. What the ego calls being radically out of control, our true nature calls the groundless ground. The groundless ground. And in order to get comfortable with the groundless ground, one of the greatest ways to get comfortable with it is not through sitting in silence and trying to chant your mantra and blast yourself into some heaven realm. In order to get comfortable with the groundless ground, we have to let go of control completely and totally. And the release has to happen, first from the mind, then from the emotional nature. But the third place it really has to take place from is within the body. That the body has to just deeply relax and trust. And if you notice, when you give yourself permission to have a good cry, like that's the body saying, okay, okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to let go. It's okay to shake and tremble. And a great question, when you face this doorway is what is my direct experience, as I'm sitting here trembling? Can I notice the ground falling out from under my consciousness, from under me, from throughout me, from under my body? Excuse me. Can I notice that my consciousness is the groundless ground? My consciousness, it's always expanding. People are very comfortable with our consciousness expanding horizontally. It's like, oh, I feel spacious. I feel blissful. To speak about the Buddha's teaching on impermanence, you literally feel the ground fall out from under you. It's actually quite thrilling. Thrilling. And so one of the great ways of getting comfortable, with this new realm is to give yourself permission to grieve, to unload, to unravel. To unravel. And notice that you are completely and totally okay. Many times on this path, I literally reach down and touch the earth and say, okay, it's still here. It's still here. Because often my experience just feels like the ground's just falling out from under me. From under me. This is what the Buddha was speaking about with impermanence. He wasn't so much speaking about material things as the impermanence of experience. It comes, it goes, it falls away. Can you become radically comfortable with this? This is what it means to be awake. You're radically comfortable with your experience just falling away, disappearing, the solidity of self falling away. And so, kind of got on and on there, but here's another question. Okay, this is from Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Craig, I feel I am losing passion for my spiritual journey. The excitement has faded. I have lost passion for my yoga practice and meditation. Why is this happening? And the feeling this way frustrates me, pushes me further from my practice. Yeah, Sarah, that's a great question. So oftentimes on the path, our passion fades, and it can be, for a number of different reasons, but I'm going to take a couple guesses here. So if there's something in our life that we are avoiding within us, you will start to feel deadness. You may start to feel deadness in your spiritual path. So say, for example, like I'm a hardcore meditator and, just make something up here. I'm really struggling with my kids, but I'm just completely ignoring the kids and I just meditate. Oftentimes what will happen is, God, life, the universe, whatever you want to call it, will shut off the juice to you. Will just shut off the juice. And the reason is because, God wants you to look at your life. Wants you to see what is it that you're avoiding. What is it here in your practical, everyday reality that you're avoiding? And so if you avoid something, oftentimes God shuts off the juice because God's trying to point you in the direction of stop trying to come to me in heaven. Can you look at your life and see where you are putting a block between you and me, between you and life, between you and life? So that's a great question. So if you have a shadow, a wound, a struggle, and we're avoiding it in any way, oftentimes God turns off the juice. The other thing that happens is just psychologically, if we're spending a lot of energy repressing a painful emotion, memory, something in our life that we know, but we act like we don't know it, and so we're repressing it, your practice will dry up. And so that's a common thing. So that, that could be something to look at, to just take a peek at your life. Another thing you might take a look at is I'm sorry, I just went completely blank here. Sometimes when I speak about the groundless ground, my mind gets really silent. Let me look at your question again. Oh, yes. So another thing that comes up is on the path, God will give you maybe 3 3 or more experiences of the void. And the void it's a real fun one. Like you may be practicing along and you may be, just feeling really good and really energized. If you have a strong yoga practice, you might feel like a lot of prana in your body. And then God may just wipe it all away. And you just feel like you're in like no man's land. Like I don't feel anything at all. And one of the things that life is trying to do is to ask you, do you have a backbone? How committed are you? How committed are you? If we practice and we just get great results all the time, like normally that's what happens in the beginning. God is oftentimes like a drug dealer, first one's free, feels good in the beginning, and then get you hooked. And then after you're hooked, then you have to start paying for it, You have to start paying for it. And I can remember, I shouldn't say this, but I just will anyways. Just when I was a young kid and one of my first friends, he got a hookup for some weed and some marijuana, and the drug dealer said to him, and this guy was a drug dealer who my buddy was dealing with, the first one's free, literally. And he just gave him a big bag and sent him out to all his friends, got everyone excited, a bunch of 14-year-old boys excited. And, the next time he's like, hey, I'm going to give you all this and you better come back with a bunch of money or I'm going to break your legs. And with God, it's a little different. God's not going to break our legs. What God does is God gets us hooked and then throws us into the void. And if you haven't experienced the void, don't let me scare you at all about it. It's just an experience where oftentimes you just lose passion. And for some people, you just lose a little bit of passion. For some of us, if the void's really intense, you lose all passion. Like just all desire, all passion is wiped away. And life is looking at you saying, what do you want? Because oftentimes what happens egoically, if we don't get what we want egoically, and I mean like a spiritual ego, our spiritual ego likes bliss, it likes spaciousness, it likes to feel good. It doesn't like to plateau. It likes to always be, progressing. And if we don't get that, oftentimes the ego will regress back to where we were before. We'll kind of give up our practice and we'll go back to where we were before. And so life is looking at you saying, do you have a backbone? How committed are you? Are you willing to show up every day? And for me, like the first 20 years of practicing, like I was one of those guys who literally never missed a day of practice in 20 years. And now I'm going on, I don't know how many years, but, 25, 28 years, who knows? But it's like, I don't miss a day of practice. It's just this commitment I have to life. And I don't care how advanced anyone is. My teacher, he told me this story when he was meeting with, he was with one of his teachers on retreat, an old Zen master. And he said, this guy was like 86 years old leading the retreat. And, they had their formal periods of practice during retreat. And my teacher, this is before he was teaching, so he's a young guy. He walked by the room of the Zen master. And he saw him just doing prostrations, late into the night with tears in his eyes. He's just continuing to open his heart and give himself. This old Zen master was fully enlightened, incredible being. And here he was just practicing away. So the beautiful thing about practice, Sarah, is it keeps us humble. It's a gentle reminder to our ego, who's the boss? Is my ego the boss? Or is my commitment to truth the boss? the boss of my life? And so it's a great question is, well, who's the boss? And there's times when we have no desire on the path. We're sick, we have the flu, we don't want to practice. But can we lay in bed, say our mantra? Can we lay in bed, hold our heart? Can we continue to open and feel and experience the spaciousness in the room? Some of the most beautiful meditations I've ever had is when I've been sick as hell. Sick as hell. And so the thing about the void is when our passion falls away and we're not getting that, the input, or the experience that we like from our practice. Again, the ego often wants to give up, go back to its addiction, go back to its, it tends to just take a huge step back. And the question is, can we make a huge step forward and continue to practice? And what I like to think of with the void is I'm walking through it to the other side. To the other side. I'm walking through it. And I don't care how long it takes. What's the other option? I can go back to samsara. I can, what can people do? I can go hop on Hulu and binge watch Seinfeld, which I like to have a good laugh, with Jerry and George and Kramer. But, after 2 episodes or 3 episodes, it's just like, geez, okay, what am I doing? What am I doing? How much more of this, can I handle? Am I avoiding my life, or am I committed to it fully? One of the visions that I have for people on the path is that we're warriors. We are spiritual warriors on this path. We're warriors. And so a warrior will show up every day and continue to practice. Now, the other thing, too, I can invite you to look at is, can you adjust your practice? Can you adjust it and see? If your practice is yoga, can you try a different type of yoga? Can you try yoga nidra, which is, to me, a beautiful practice of just laying down, scanning the body, feeling all the different parts of the body. And again, going back to that first thing I said, see if there's any energy that's stuck, any energy that's confused, any place that we're avoiding. Is there a big shadow? And as you open to that and release that energy, oftentimes we will be propelled out of the void, or we get our passion back. Sometimes if we only do, hatha yoga, but we try a little bit of pranayama, that can get the juices flowing again. Sometimes we may be doing yoga, and it may be that we're at the end of our journey with yoga. It can take us as far as it can, say, spiritually. You continue to practice, of course, just because it's so good for the body. But maybe you need to do a deeper meditation practice. One of the great things that I found is if I plateau, what I love to do is give myself a retreat, a personal retreat. So spend a day in silence, a week in silence, go do a 10-day Vipassana retreat. And oftentimes when you step into the retreat container, all of a sudden everything wakes up again in a much greater way. And that's one of the things that I've done, throughout my life, just to propel myself, is retreat time. It's hard to plateau for long or get stuck. If you're doing a retreat, a season. I like to think of a retreat, a season. So every every 3 months or so, doing a retreat. I don't care if it's 1 day or 10 days. I like more. And so, you know, give yourself the gift of that. So anyways, beautiful question, Sarah. Thank you. Thank you so much. And does anyone else here have a question? Anyone else on Facebook, welcome in. Anyone else on Zoom? You can go ahead and grab the mic if you're on Zoom. Wesley, are you coming forward with something, or is it Taylor? What are you guys?
Hey, Craig.
Is that Richard?
Yeah, it is.
Hey, Richard. Oh, yeah, there you are. So, and I'm sorry that I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty with Zoom tonight. I see my camera's in the wrong place and everything. But anyways, ask away, Richard. What's your question?
Yeah, I actually see that Wesley has his hand up, and I think my question could probably be answered another time. So I would love to give him the opportunity to speak.
Okay.
Thanks, Craig.
Yeah, sure.
Great, thank you. Hello.
Yeah, let me find you, Wesley. Yeah, I can hear you.
You can hear me? Okay.
Yeah, there you are.
Yeah, it's been really rich sharing tonight, and just seems this is the way it goes. The questions I come in with are often addressed. So there might not be more to say about this, but I've been reading, really kind of resonating with some of the teachings of Ramana Maharshi, and the self-inquiry process, and thinking a lot about what he calls, or I think just in the East, vasanas. The way that I understand it is just something like deep tendencies, maybe even traumas, things that are kind of deep in our conditioning. I'm not sure if that's kind of how I understood it.
Yeah.
But he was talking, he was expressing, or I was reading something about, and actually Adyashanti, I'm also listening to an audiobook, and they both talk about for this awakeness to really become an abiding experience, those deep impressions need to be addressed. I think you talked about that with grief and kind of letting things come up. But I guess the question I have is, Ramana, his solution really is just always self-inquiry. He says, something comes up and you inquire, a pain comes up, you say, whose pain is this? And usually the response is going to be me, and you inquire into that me. And so, I don't know, it seems it's a really simple response. It's hard to complicate it, but I just wonder if you have any thoughts about that. It seems maybe simplistic. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and Wesley, that's something that I struggled with for many years on the path, because I tried, basically I tried to use inquiry to get rid of my human self, and what I found was it would work temporarily. In fact, oftentimes it worked really good temporarily. So, say I was really angry or frustrated or sad or hurt or, feeling whatever it was. Like, let's take something like public humiliation. That's a fun one that I've experienced a time or two. And so when I experienced public humiliation, and if I just sat down, through the practice of self-inquiry, it was like, who is it that's here that's feeling this pain? Like, show me the me. And if I just look, as soon as I start looking, it's just like, boom, there's nothing there. And I experience this incredible freedom. And that's a wonderful thing. But then, maybe an hour later, all of a sudden, that pain is just arising in my body again. It's arising in my body. And so what I learned to do is I like to look at things developmentally. So Ramana, he wasn't much of a developmental guy. He was a direct guy. You look at something, you see through it, and it disappears. And, if we look at him and how he was wired, one, he was an avatar, which means it's hard to compare his life to ours. Like, he was just this incredible being. And so, like, he woke up when he was like 14 or something, and then sat in a cave, for another 14 years. And it was just like ridiculous. Like, I saw where he practiced. I visited. It was like, my God, the conditions there were just horrific. And so that was his path. He's kind of the monastic path. For the rest of us who aren't on the monastic path, like, he literally, just wore like a loincloth for his life. And so, like, that's how much engaged he was with his human self. When cancer came and, started to grow in his body, it's like he didn't go to the doctor or do anything. He just let it go. And so that's one type of living. But for the rest of us here on planet Earth, I think we require a much more integrated path. And so what I started to discover is, okay, inquiry works beautifully, but not always permanently. What works permanently? What actually creates a building block for the foundation of what you're describing as abiding awakening? We need to have spaciousness and peace, like clarity of mind, that's one. We need to have love. And we need to have incredible strength and indestructibility. These are the basic building blocks. This is head, heart, gut. Vast, spacious awareness, unconditional loving heart, unconditional strength and indestructibility. These are the building blocks for an abiding awakening. So if there is something inside that's hurting, like a child, if you look at a child and say, you're not real, that child will grip, will feel isolated, will feel alone, will become neurotic, develop addictive qualities or whatever, tendencies and this and that. And so I just look at a child and say, I can't, through inquiry, make you disappear. And by a child, I mean, if you feel inside, if something is hurting, oftentimes it feels childlike. We feel abandoned, we feel abused, we feel unacknowledged, we feel ignored, we feel like our basic needs aren't met. But there's a funny thing that happens with children. When you meet their basic needs and flood them with love, they become quiet and happy and psychologically healthy. So if you want a wonderful building block for an abiding awakening, psychological health is such an important thing. So there's head, heart, gut. That's the, basic, different experience of non-dual awakening. And these realms, as you realize them, as you step into them, they create the foundation of the direct experience. But if your human self is a psychological mess, which most of us are, myself included, this was like most of my life was a psychological mess. If you meet a psychological mess with love, what happens? It heals and it starts to come into harmony immediately. If you look at a psychological mess and you ignore it, what the psychological mess inside does is it becomes more neurotic, more troublesome. And so what you find is your daily meditation practice, it starts getting more difficult because, there's like a crazy man, a crazy person inside. This is one of the things I noticed on the path is I would sit, I could experience silence, and then all of a sudden there was a crazy man inside. It's like, who is that crazy man? How can I get him to shut up? Oh, I know how. I'll say my mantra more. I'll do inquiry with him. Who is this crazy man? I see through him. He doesn't exist. But he comes back again and again and again. But when I love him and hold him, he integrates into me. He integrates into me. It becomes radically silent. So let me give like a felt experience of this. Say if we go back to that experience of grieving. We look inside. We see there's something suffering. We try the inquiry practice. Who is it that's suffering? Show me the ego that's suffering. You can't see anything. It disappears. Beautiful. 5 minutes later, it comes back. Oh no. So you look at it again. And when you look at your suffering with compassion, what happens is the one who was suffering starts to shake, starts to tremble, starts to cry. Tears release. The psychological pressure starts to release. The inner child feels held, feels loved. And then the inner child, instead of manifesting pain and confusion and neurosis, the inner child starts to manifest their true nature, which is innocence. And if you notice, like I was speaking to, this other person earlier, this question about, the practice drying up. If you get to a state of awareness where you're just trying to deconstruct everything through inquiry, oftentimes you don't feel innocent. You feel spacious, but it doesn't feel very alive. It just feels like you're trying to get rid of your human self. But if you allow this innocence to come forward and to merge with spaciousness, spaciousness becomes so alive, so vibrant, so lovely. The heart comes online. And so you feel spacious and innocent and tender and compassionate. And because you're willing to face your pain with absolute love, which is the scariest thing for most people to do. They'll do anything to avoid their pain. When you embrace your pain with absolute love, you discover incredible strength. And here you have 3 different awakenings coming forward, head, heart, gut, all through embracing the very thing we're trying to get rid of. And the beautiful thing is when you love something, it dissolves into harmony. It dissolves into harmony. If you inquire into something basic, like, who is it that cares about, something I don't really care about. Who is it that's overly concerned with what he's having for dinner tonight? You look inside, nobody. Okay, good. That human thing where you're really concerned about what you're eating, it dissolves and it's not a big deal. No big deal. That's a non-issue. That's a great time to use inquiry when things are not a big deal. But when things are a big deal, when you truly didn't have your psychological needs met as a child, you cannot skip steps. So if your parents drop the ball in a huge way, what life forces you to do is for you to be the force of love. For you to basically do what your parents did not do. Because evolution doesn't like any of us to skip steps. It doesn't like us to skip steps. It will not let us skip a step. Evolution will not. Evolution is God. Spaciousness is God, but evolution is God as well. And so all these things are deeply connected. So anyways, use inquiry. And if it doesn't work, use love. Use love. And if you start to feel anxious while you're loving, can you love deeper, fuller? Can you love with strength and a clear mind. A clear mind. Inquiry will give you a clear mind, but oftentimes it's not enough to fully heal our being. So anyways, it looks like I've kind of gone over my my limit for the evening. Thank you all for showing up. It's been so nice. If any of you want to make a donation, support the Sangha to help spread the teachings, it's greatly appreciated. And a big thank you to all those who supported the webcast this week. My heart's with you all. May peace be with you. And have a wonderful evening. Good night.